Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is greatly important, so feel free. Show ideas, questions, comments, concerns. Email me, follow me on Substack, X, and of course fill up those comments in YouTube. And I greatly appreciate all the listeners on YouTube and all the platforms that I'm on. I appreciate y'all so much. And I'm going to list off a few of the audio platforms that I'm on. So, as it goes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Spreaker, of course. Thank you so much, Spreaker. And I am on Amazon Music, just to name a few. I'm on Castbox too, I believe, Deezer, and I'm looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your podcast audio content. I'm definitely on that. So this is the conclusion and the ending of the Halloween theme for the month of October. So I'm going to focus in on iZombie. So I'm going to give my commentary about, first, my commentary about the difference between the comics versus the television series adaptation of it. And then I'm just going to go into the detail about the comics and when it was released and all of that. And then give even further analysis about it. All right, here we go. All right, briefly, thoughts. So, iZombie, one of those, comic books are very interesting. So, here's what I mean by this. So, there's been a lot of, analysis and theories on this. Pretty much, this is my take about comic books. So, comic books, when you're in certain companies, specifically, me, growing up and then in my 20s and stuff like that. So it's, the notion, comic books is either it's kiddie stuff or it's either, nerd gobbledygook or what have you. There's no in between. It's always an extreme. So it's unfortunate. It was one of those things where if you only look at things for the surface level, you don't try to dig deeper into it, then you miss out. So the same argument can be said about anime. And of course, there's anime out there that's really more suitable for children. And there's the extreme of it to where it's just ultra gore and it's just wildly outrageous. But there's a lot of anime that has universal themes that a lot of people can relate to. So, case in point, I'm pulling back in my knowledge about it. Everything with anime. So Cowboy Bebop, even though it was, the adaptation missed the point or missed the mark about Cowboy Bebop. So, and then I'm going to get to JoJo's Bizarre Circus. And then, So, and then Old Boy, that's a rough one. But the universal theme of Old Boy is pretty, prolific. So, okay, and then I think that's the whole point too with, superhero comic books, telling a story. People who actually don't, it's either two process thing, I think, from my point of view. It's either they just want to do something when they adapt these things, either adapt into film or adapt into a television creation of it. They want to do it out of monetary goals, or somebody said, oh, this is really this. They see the bandwagon of everything that's been popular, and they want to try to hand it, and they don't really want to take the time to read and analyze and make the analysis that they should do. But it's always the excuse, oh, we're under budget, we don't have enough time. But you kind of should take the time to do it if you want to, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, when you think about it from a production point of view and a monetary point of view. Don't you want to take the time to know what the details and everything about it, so the fans of it will feel a great admiration, appreciation, same thing, but great, they know that you care. And then from that, you get loyalty, and then you want to span out to merchandise and all these kind of things. They'll follow through, you'll attract that. But needless to say, comic books are more than what it seems, what people present, what it seems. And so, for instance, me personally, I like Love and Rockets. I was introduced about this comic book through a boss when I was at the U of H. And then, it caught my attention because it was mainly centered around music and the aspect of, at the time, of rock and new wave, and then, making a story out of that in the lives of these people. And that's quite interesting. And so that's the aspect that I want to lead to and go to with iZombie. So the comic book is very interesting, and it has a very particular take about the aspect of femininity, the aspect of what would it be. Okay, for case in point, before I get into it, the deep analysis about it. So case in point, if you had the perspective to actually walk in someone else's shoes and see things how they see them, to the depths, the visceral depths, I would say, of the senses of seeing, feeling, touching, tasting, and you're engulfed into these people's sight, what they experienced. Would that change you? How would you see things? And so the series iZombie, I think they did a really good take on that aspect and that analysis of, okay, we are, of course, with the zombie tropes or what have you, we're going to take another route to where it's more human arc of a hero finding, the hero tale, or the hero, I wouldn't say hero complex, but maybe, there's things in there about that, about discovering and who you actually are in your hero lineage, or the plight of your destiny to be this hero. And it also wraps up into the reality, the brutal reality of being a zombie and what that is, what that means, And then also with how they changed everything as far as the characters in the television series versus the comic book is quite interesting too. All right, with enough said, here we go. Getting into the analysis. All right, so here I'm going to do the analysis, and then I'm going to go and wrap up everything with the facts. So, wow, the comic books, it's It's very interesting. But comic. There's been other books that's done that, but it's unique too in it how. And then I guess you can say this too about Deadpool, how it's meta, but it's comedic at the same time, and so it is part of the DC comic realm too. It's part of the DC Comics. So with that being said, even DC Comics is a rival of Marvel. But it's one of those weird things too, where I get it with the aspect of this is better or I prefer this, but when you get into the fact of the matter of sometimes there can be beefs where Marvel is better, DC is better, and to the aspect of Star Trek versus Star Wars and stuff like that, Trekkie versus this, it's all good. Just appreciate all the things, the artistic merit for what it is, All right, so my analysis. So I would say that with the television adaptation, they changed a lot of characters, particularly, without me giving everything away. I'm just going to do some deep analysis, but not in deep to where I tell everything. So Ellie, for instance, and then her name is changed, I believe, in the iZombie character Gwen. It's Gwen in the comic books, but I believe it's some different name in the television series. So her friend is actually in the comic book is a ghost. So it gives I think the reason why they chose to change it in the television series is to make commentary about the aspect of the transition of who Gwen used to be. I'm referring to Gwen from the comic book, who she used to be, and what her life was prior to her becoming a zombie, and then how her family was, and her love life, what all of that was, and that overarching tone of setting up the plight and the character struggle, for the aspect of how being a zombie will change her into the heroic calling that is destined upon her, whether she wants it or not. So when you go into the comic books, it's already established that she's a zombie throughout the intro. And then you get the aspect of her friend Ellie, that she's a ghost. But also, you give the elements of a human condition of emotions that people can really relate to where it's a nice touch to get the reader into the story. So what am I saying? So when Gwen is talking to Ellie, she recalls a memory that Ellie knew about, or was important to her when she was living, and then that made her sad. But she was just, Gwen has that sarcastic humor, or sort of, I don't think, it's one of those comparisons to say, so along the lines of, because that was more prevalent, particularly in the 90s, that would be very sarcastic and deadpan humor, So, she was just doing that just to break the tension that was going on in the scene. But Gwen also reassured the readers that she's not just an a-hole. She actually has empathy for her friend. She actually understands. And she says she makes it clear that, ghosts in their element, they don't feel sadness for very long. They just briefly get over it and then move on to the next thing. And so with this, excuse me just a minute. Okay, allergies. It'd be nasty, especially in the fall. Okay, moving on. So, with that said, I think that, too, the Ellie character, per se, the difference between what was depicted in the show and then what is depicted in the comic books makes, or the story plot, quite different in a way. So I'm going to go to the television series and then go back to the comic book. So the Ellie character, the way she is in the television series, of course she's alive, she's a human, but she's very confident and assured, and she knows where she's going and her way of directions of her career and in a way of directions of her femininity. Now that's a stark contrast to where the Gwen character is when she transitions to being a zombie. She's lethargic, she's unkempt, she dresses down. She's not her female, what she once used to be, as far as, classically attractive and very ambitious. That's all to the wayside because her personality is quite different because she's a zombie. And then, so the Ellie character in the television series at first she doesn't know how quite to adjust to this because she's out of her character flaw, her character trait. And so that calls her to action to tell Gwen, the Gwen character in the iZombie television series, that you got to shape up, you got to do something. And that's another call to action for the Gwen character in the series to reevaluate herself and to find to cope with the aspect that she is not who she formerly was. She is of this character. She is of this plight, I guess you want to say, of being a zombie. That's how it's presented in the television series. Now, in the comic book series, it's quite different. So, she already is established to know that she is a zombie. She made peace with it. She understands it. But at the same time, the transition is hard for her as far as doing the sense memories of the people who when zombies do what they do, they eat what they eat. When she eats what they eat out of their brain matter, eat their brain matter, she gets their memories. And that's hard for her. Like, viscerally, you can see it's well descriptive and well written, and you can see it how that just takes a toll on her to where it's hard for her to adjust to it. And so that's another call to action for her to get this sense of urgency that all of these visions that she's getting to help and help the person with their plight of what was unfinished business for them and the way that they died. And so that's another thing that is very prevalent in the television series, that the Gwen character teams up with the police enforcement and to, in itself, solve crimes. And then, it circles back around to the corporation, the science corporation that's prevalent in that town, and she finds out and she discovers through that corporation is involved with her becoming a zombie. So it's quite different. In the comic book version, there is a person, a man, that she inadvertently finds when she's trying to figure out what happened to the person who brain matter she ate, what happened to him, how with his demise, how that happened, and it led her to find this character, this man, who explains to him, who explains to her that, being a zombie is something that is unique in itself and that you should preserve it. But at the same time, she calls him out for his stuff because he's not all what he seems, because, he's involved in the aspects of the demise of this person that she has the sense memory of, when I read it and from my interpretation of what I'm understanding about it. And so it's quite interesting how it goes in this lineage of all this throughout time of all these. You would say it's an arc of different supernatural levels, explaining the supernatural levels of a host or infection, which is something that is quite scientifically proven to be that can happen, for the aspect of a virus, from that point of view. And it's just that extra layer of explaining that is just a fine touch to say, I would say quite, to get into the real aspect of how that links to how not just, doing a typical trope about the, how explaining it from a scientific point of view, how zombies are, the lure of zombies, how that can come to be, even though that's just, it's just fun, theories, it's not real, zombies aren't real. But to explain it from a scientific, with sort of cell-like, virus-like level is quite nice, because it goes also into the layers to explain the aspect of Scott, the Scott character, which you can say maybe that is the character of in the television series of her ex-fiance. Now, it's quite different in the television series because he is, an investigative journalist from what I understand. And that's, his character development is quite different in television series versus in the comic book. So Scott, it explains that, and then with his story arc, and then I'm going to go back to Ellie, and then, of course, send her back around to Gwen. So with Scott, and I think this is where I get back to this Deadpool, this meta thing and the humor in it. So, it goes throughout his whole life. It starts out with him as a kid, and his grandfather talks to him about, you will equate this to, the Howdy Doody shows and stuff like that. This is from my point of view. I really like history. I love history. It's just great. So, and those kiddie shows at the time, HR Puff and stuff like that. But particularly with Howdy Doody, how it would be a live action show and get kids to be very interactive with a cartoon character that is true to life, whether it be Howdy Doody be a ventriloquist dummy, so to speak, or whether it be a puppet, something like that. So, his grandfather is explaining to him why he's a kid, and then when he gets older, he gets into comic books. But back when he's a kid, he says that his grandfather, it goes into this lineage of saying that he had aspirations of being an actor, but he didn't quite make it up to par because of he doesn't have the classic good looks that they were looking for, so he was stuck being this chimp. So he was in the realm of animation cartoon world, that's how he made his butter. That's how he made his living. So his viewpoint about cartoons and animation was that it's just something he had to do as a means to end to have a career, and it's just monetary, like work. Just it's nothing special. It's nothing that's particularly something to be proud of. But without him understanding this, Scott had a great deal and aspiration of his grandfather, and that led to him discovering about comic books. And then it goes on to him, going into high school and then graduating from university, and then saying his father constantly, his grandfather, well, his guardian, that is, constantly reminding him, you need some real direction in your life. You need to grow up. And not understanding why is that's prevalent comic books. Why is this, why don't you go out of this aspect? So I think that's making commentary of how a lot of people on surface level see comic books. People who are particularly fans or attracted to comic books, they're either slackers or they have no real direction in life. But Scott, he used his gifts and his ability of what he was wanted to be as a career, and he became, head in IT department. And so, he was going about his life, and then he found this wolf, and then the guy who was explaining everything about the levels of the toll of spirits or supernatural beings, or how they're haunted by being undead or something like that. It's a tiered process to where essentially Scott is a host for another undead being, to the aspect of he's really being possessed by the spirit of this wolf, and he has no control, and that changes him. But in the aspects of that, he takes it very well. He just says, okay, it is what it is. When the full moon comes out, I just got to stay home, hunker down, and then move on with my life. And that's quite remarkable in the aspects of that. That's very adult and mature of him, which his grandfather mistakenly doesn't see that merit that he has in his grandson, Scott. And so when he meets Gwen and Ellie, it changes him because he doesn't feel so alone anymore. He feels like he can relate to them, but he doesn't know why. And then it is quite, also it's quite nice that I'm saying because, going back and thinking and recalling all these things, it's just a nice touch of telling everything without being to something of a typical trope of what you have seen already. So when he sees Gwen, it's this thing of, he even describes it as love at first sight. And he's called to her, but he doesn't quite know what to do. So he just, again, he's not has that self-confidence, right? But Gwen is the one that pulls him out of that, because she calls him over to where they are, Gwen and Ellie are, and then out of that, he forms a bond with them, a friendship. And so from this, they all develop their characters, and you slowly get to know who these people are in this comic book. So with Ellie, it's quite interesting with her. So she is a ghost, but she is perpetually stuck in the time era in which she died, where she demised. She no longer alive here. So it says that she passed on 40 years ago. So essentially that would equate. So the information that I found, so the comic book was made around 2010, 2012, in the end of 2012, and I'll talk about that again in the facts. So the way she looks and then character references, and then how she sees, talks about, she doesn't quite understand the internet. She doesn't understand that you can use that to find out information quite instantly. You don't have to do this very tedious task to find information, or to ask people, or go out and write copious notes to find out if it's actually factually true. She doesn't understand anything. And so that equates to that she might be from the 60s. And so it's also it's quite interesting because, she demised at a very young age, right at the cusp when she was in a aspect of wanting to travel and discover who she is, her youth as a young woman. And so she didn't get to do that, and she didn't get to develop, past and become a real an adult and all that. And so because of that, she has this childlike, innocent wonder, but at the same time, it's hopeful, and that it's not overbearing to where it takes you away from her character development. And so it also, I think, makes commentary about the aspect of, at that time, with the 60s, particularly with youth, when the aspect of rediscovering, redefining what it means to be an adult, means to be well versed or well understood of the world around you, and then you saw the aspirations of a lot of youth wanting to travel and go from town to town, go all these different places. And also, it's quite interesting too how there's an element of going back to in the 60s when it was very prevalent about the Scooby-Doo and everything, but they made a subtle joke about it, to where or they make a commentary back to the era in which Ellie was young. So it's quite interesting. So John Solo, he did a very good take about this. So back early on in his YouTube career, John Solo, he did an analysis about Scooby-Doo. So he essentially made this point that Scooby-Doo in itself is darker than you think. So they're making commentary about the aspects of war, and particularly in the Vietnam War. So how all these characters came together is because they were dodging the draft, and Daphne is the girlfriend, of this guy who's brooding and very patriotic looking, and you would think he would want to serve his country, but no, they're all on the run from not wanting to escape the draft. And Shaggy is quite the typical aspect of a person who would be a draft dodger, as was quoted. And then Velma is a protest or a feminist, so to speak, and making a commentary about that, but slightly, not as, abrupt if this was for adults. And it's quite sad that the Velma, revamp is just completely perverted and disturbed in itself, and I don't know. And that's missing the mark, because they could have just went with it, either if they wanted to do a cartoon or a live action deal, went with it and get into that aspect of what John Solo was talking about, and the aspect of that of, getting into the realities of war or the realities of Vietnam in itself and what that type of war took the toll on society, that would be quite interesting. And so me expelling all these things is this point that I'm proving too, is that it's very nice when you take the time to say or do things artistically that has a lot of merit to it, that has a lot of complicated issues or complicated means, but it's not either perverse or distorted, which is perversion in itself, and it's not surface level or diluted down to you to where you feel like these people who created this artistic entity actually doesn't value me intellectually. And so I think iZombie did a good, nice blend of everything. And especially going back to Gwen with her character trait, how she is in herself. She is a zombie, but at the same time, you look past all that and you see the humanity in her, because she's not on this rampage of just, looking for brain matter or, trying to harm people or anything like that. She's actually having a lot of issues, but she's trying to cope with everything. But at the same time, she's trying to, reiterate who she is as a person. And then it also brings the aspect of femininity too, where Gwen is how she looks. She's beautiful, but at the same time, she's ghoulish looking. But she's not as, it's in between that area of, she's not as classically put together as her friend Ellie, where, you could tell that when Ellie was alive, she would be of the popular crowd of, being in the in crowd, whereas Gwen, she would be someone that would be unnoticeable, but noticeable at the same time in a different way. And it's one of those things. I'm making commentary about the aspect of femininity of what is, classically seen as beautiful versus what is an offset, and it redefines the aspect of beauty in itself, But it's not one of those things that bashing your head at, or you have to accept who I am or nothing, which is unfortunate and which is falling toward the wayside now about this whole aspect of fat is beautiful, this aspect of being not being unkempt, not caring about your appearance is acceptable when it isn't. So kudos on the creators of iZombie, and then kudos on the creator, Rob Thomas, and all the other people that were in the creation for the television series, because they got that very right with the adaptation of being true to life to, what all these different elements and what they were saying in the comic book. And I think, again, that goes to the aspect of either these people actually care and they are fans of iZombie, and that really translates a lot in the depiction. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up and go into the facts next. Okay, here are the facts. This is the AI generated, tongue-tied there. Let's try one more time. This is the AI generated response to the origin of iZombie comic book. So the iZombie comic book series was created by writer Chris Robinson and artist Michael Aldred. Published by DC Comics Vertigo imprint and debuted in 2010. The series follows the life of Gwen Dillon, a zombie who works as a gravedigger in Eugene, Oregon, to be close to her food supply. Now, The supporting characters: Gwen, a former medical resident, becomes a zombie after attending a party that unexpectedly turns into a zombie feeding frenzy. To survive, she must eat brain matter, which grants her temporary memories and abilities. Gwen works and it goes into the aspect about everything. So if you're interested, I would suggest finding, the books, comic books online. I believe there's a free version of it, a PDF version of it, and then, of course, buying it. So supporting characters: Ellie, she's from the 60s, as I said, who becomes Gwen's friend and confidant. Scott is a Ware Terrier who is Gwen's boyfriend, and, he becomes her husband. Gavin Price, Gwen's brother, and I believe Horatio is the pronunciation of it. So it's a monster hunter, and I'm not going to give everything away about that. And then Vincent Tan and Ash Hook Pato, they're friends and co-workers of Scott. So the source is Amazon.com, is iZombie fandom, and iZombie wiki from fandom. And it gives more, just to name off a few, but it gives some of a concrete source here on this fandom website, iZombie Wiki, and I will link this source for you in this episode. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. I would like to know questions, comments, concerns. What you think about this episode? What you think about comic books in general, and particularly with the iZombie series. So email me, follow me, make comments on Substack, and of course, fill up those comments on YouTube. It's greatly appreciated. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye.